It feels like every couple months somebody comes in and they have this hot take, and the hot take is, let's get rid of all the comic shops. Why are we distributing a physical product anyway? Digital is where it's at. I don't even understand why we're trying to keep this physical product alive. What's going on? Well, this week it was Comics Explained, and a couple of people have done videos on this, but I want to take it from kind of a different perspective than maybe some other people have had, from a retailer perspective, and also from just a comic reality perspective. So let's get into that. What's the take there? Hey everybody, this is Perch. There's a lot of big channels out there, I think, that get that have a million subscribers, or so me with my puny little number. I mean, it's tiny amount of people. Although I value each one of you, very very highly. I'd rather have this small audience of people who engage than kind of the big audience that kind of clowns around, or maybe I paid for. I don't know. I'm not casting any stones. Who knows what happened. Anyway. There's this part of how you get to be a huge subscribed channel is that you do hot takes, and the hot takes aren't always the necessarily informed ones. People don't like to sit through nuance and details. I mean, don't I know it from the stuff I do? But the hot takes are deceptive. They're usually, they take a particular slant, and usually they all fall into the same trap, and that is a trap of, this is my worldview, and thus my worldview must be true for everyone. My experience is everyone's experience. And this is on display a little bit with Comics Explained. So this is a very large channel, and the premise of this live stream was, I'll make you a comic expert in 30 minutes and everything else, which did not accomplish that. But the whole topic, the 30 minutes, kind of wandered into this conversation around, why are we trying to save a physical product? Why are we, making all these plans and doing all these things around physical distribution of comic books when digital is the future, digital is where everything's going? And then kind of, he walks through debunking several things about comic shops and the comic community, like, what comic community? What are we talking about? Is there a comic community? When you go into a shop, there's no community. You're buying your comics, you're leaving. And it basically commits the very large sin of, it's his experience, and he's sitting there kind of joking around with it a little bit, and it's not an informed perspective, and it's not a logical one. So a lot of people hear me push back on this, and they think, well, he's a retailer, he's opening up another comic shop, so of course he's got a business interest in having physical product distributed. And while that's true, it's not as true as you would think. I am a technologist. I'm an early adopter. I'm somebody who often leads groups and tasks well beyond comics into digital transformation. I believe that evolution is inevitable. I've done videos on this topic as well, where I'll hear people say, nobody will ever go to digital because people just like holding a physical product in their hand, or they like the smell of comics, or whatever it happens to be. Those all sound like nice things, but the same thing was true when people were arguing that the video store would never go away, that Blockbuster would be around forever. I mean, there were articles written about how Blockbuster was going to be one of the biggest brands, up there with Disney, 20 years ago. It's laughable to think that today, because something came along and it had the right feature set, it had the right functionality, and it had the right user experience and usability, that it took off, and thus digital movies were successful. It was just too easy to get them through your cable provider, through Apple TV or Roku or Android or whatever it happened to be. It solved the distribution problem, and it built a business. Same thing was true with music. 10 years earlier, these evolutionary traits happen, and they are inevitable. But when they happen and how they happen is how well you plan for them. And where comic books are concerned, there's a reality here that people always skip over. Have you watched the South Park episode where they meet the underwear gnomes? And it's like, step 1, collect underwear. Step 2, question mark. Step 3, profit. A lot of people who like to talk about how digital comics are the future and why are you even bothering with physical product and everything else, they're jumping to step 3, and they're completely ignoring the fact that there is no step 2. There's big parts of infrastructure that are failing. There is not a digital comics business today. But wait, you might say, what about Comixology? Comixology is in its infancy. It has no momentum behind it right now. None. You don't have to take my word for it. You can go look at what Amazon promotes. You can look at their offerings. You can look where Amazon is just at right now in the streaming war. All the rest, Amazon is not succeeding with Comixology as a digital comics product. Now they're not ready to give it up because Amazon knows what I know, what all of us know, and that at some point in the future, digital comics will be how comics are distributed. And by the way, to all the people who are like, no, physical comics are never going to die. I want to carry around my comics. That's an outdated view. You guys are stuck on step one, just like the Comics Explained guy is stuck on step three. You are all wasting your time until we get to step two. And the step two is, how is it done? How are we going to get these comics around? How are we going to get them discovered? How are we going to build search algorithms that actually work? How are we going to protect digital rights? How are we going to make sure that if you buy a comic, it doesn't disappear into the cloud or the ether one day and you don't have access to it anymore? How are we going to handle the technology gap that a cheap comic at $2.95, $3.95, $4.95 doesn't justify an $800 tablet purchase? How are we going to solve the readability issues? These are real problems, and they will get solved. Why am I so sure? Because I can look over in Japan and I can tell that they got solved over there. So it is inevitable that comics, one day, Western comics, will have a robust and healthy digital ecosystem. But we need to stop pretending that that system exists today. It does not, nor are people ready for it. Consumer, and this was the biggest fallacy in the Comics Explained video. The guy's like, I go into a comic store. Well, number one, I doubt that you go into a comic store very often. I'm just going to throw that out there. That's my own personal. Who knows? Maybe you do. I don't know, but I have my doubts. The experience that was described in this video, and it usually is the experience that's described in a lot of these hot take videos of, I go into the messy comic store to get my pull box and some paint, and then I got to chart this stuff home, and then I got to put it into bags and boards, and then I got to store it, and I don't want to do that. That is not how most comics consumers view comics. That's not how they view the hobby. It's not how they view it. Now, why does that matter? Because if you want this to be successful, you have to make money. And if you are going to make money, you're going to be making it from your consumers. So it turns out their perspective, the common perspective, is pretty damn important. Because if you forget about it and you just create something that you like or fits your small niche, your tiny use case, you're not going to make any money. And if you don't make any money, you will have no business. The evolution of comics from physical to digital will only occur when there is a viable revenue path to get there. Until there is, this is all a joke. None of this is going to mean anything. I think that a lot of people, it's not fun. A lot of the people who are commentators are doing and give their hot takes on this. They don't feel it's their job to think about step two. In fact, in many cases, they lack fundamental business experience and they just kind of hand wave away somebody will figure that out. Disney's got lots of money. They'll figure it out. Well, Disney is just barely figuring out digital audio. They are probably the last ones to the game. The only reasons that Disney has had any kind of digital advancement in media is because Apple was on their board and they actually benefited a lot from that ecosystem. Otherwise, Disney's not getting anywhere with this stuff. AT&T Time Warner is definitely a more powerful digital company, but they are a service provider. They provide a network. Their physical product are cell phone towers in a lot of cases. AT&T does not produce phones. They don't produce tablets. That's Motorola, that's LG, that's Samsung. It's not really Motorola as much anymore. It's various Android devices, Huawei, things coming in from China. They're not producing a physical reader. Digital comics, that whole ecosystem has to have a place for it to be read. And so either you're going to have to convince people to sit in front of their laptop and their PC to read a comic, which is unnatural as a form factor. It doesn't work, as we've seen. Or you're going to have to figure out how to get it smartly onto a phone, which everybody does have. or you're going to have to start selling tablets, which many people do not have, which is the logical file format for a lot of these comics. That's a huge problem to overcome. And until you overcome it, you are wasting your time talking about retiring the physical store. And this gets to the crux of this argument. What frustrates me so much about it is you cannot retire something before you have a plan. This would be equivalent to jumping out of a plane with no parachute and saying, well, I'm sure this will work out. I'll figure out the parachute situation on the way down to the ground. That's murder you're talking about. That's you dying. You have to have an actual plan before you can go anywhere. So, you should not hear me making this big, angry argument in favor of comic stores. Comic stores right now are a reality if you want to get comics distributed. If you don't like that, if for whatever reason you dislike the comic shop, you don't want it, I don't know what your beef is with it. If you have one, then you have to come up with an alternative before you start killing it off. And if your channel has 1 million subscribers based off comic books, then don't be a jackass and figure out the plan. Help figure out the plan, because if you kill off the main source of distribution, you're going to kill off your channel. I don't know how to make that any more simple or straightforward. It's a reality of the business. If you want to make money, you've got to provide an alternative. And if you're dependent on comics, you shouldn't be talking about murdering this stuff off. Now, there's a lot of other details here. I talked to Wes at Thinking Critical about this earlier. There's a bunch of problems, and there's a bunch of kind of people who get satisfied with their own devices or their own experience, and they forget about the bigger world. A lot of people point to, hey, one of the great things about digital is you get recommendations for new comics. This would be a way that you could, upsell a lot of things that you don't know about. In the comic shop you go in, you just got this wall of comics, and sometimes you have a disinterested store owner, and figuring out what to buy, what you might like, is complicated. People miss out on a lot of sales. Digital would solve that. Well, digital can solve that, but it's not an easy problem as you would think. Attach rate and marketing and getting people connected to things is actually a very hard problem. Why do we know this? You could talk to Netflix. Netflix realizes that their recommended for you algorithms are very poor. And this is Netflix, which is far more valuable and has far more money than these comic businesses have. Comixology's search and basic sorting is garbage. Everyone thinks so. If you're applauding it as being wonderful, you are not actually using it. The idea that, hey, we can market a bunch of other comics to people based on their interests sounds great in practice, but like we've been talking about, it takes work. You have to actually build it. You don't just invent these things. And if there's not money to do it, how do you think it's going to get done? Comic books is not $1 billion business like Netflix has, like Disney Plus, like Amazon Prime. And so if you look at Amazon Prime and Netflix and Disney Plus and these other services, and you go, oh, this experience is terrible. Well, how do you think it's going to be for comics? You think it's going to be better somehow for a business that has less money, less attention, less volume? You think somehow it's going to come up with a better solution? I mean, it's possible, but it's possible that a giant bag full of money is going to fall out of the sky from a plane, land in my car, and I go to an island and never even hear of me again. That would be wonderful too. That's not going to happen. I guess it's possible. That's the problem with digital is we get too much into these platitudes of, it would sure be wonderful if I could just sit on my ass and not have to go into a comic shop and digital comics could just zoom into my living room. That sounds great. Let's work to that future. But the operative word there is work. Let's stop pretending that digital is this massive juggernaut that is already hardened and perfect today, and actually get to making it. One of the big reasons why comic books isn't a form of arrested development and why the US Western side of the world has a pitiful digital comic strategy compared to Japan is because Japan worked on solving this problem. Back in 2002, they were working on solving this problem. You had demonstrations in 2006 and 2007 at San Diego Comic-Con of Viz and other groups that were actively trying to solve this problem. Shonen Jump was investing into how to do this. Here in the West, we've had Amazon do some things with Comixology. We've had Marvel and DC and the big publishers just kind of dink around with stuff. We've had them hide and inflate fictionally their digital numbers before having to finally admit they were nothing. And there isn't somebody working on this problem, not in any kind of reasonable way. All the digital solutions you see for comic books tend to be very, very dated. They look like Windows XP solutions. Now, that doesn't mean that a solution won't come. It clearly will. Japan shows us that a solution will come. But let's stop pretending that it's here now. It is not. I'm sorry for sounding, well, I'm not sorry. I mean, I know I'm passionate about this. I'm passionate about it because I hate wasting time. And that's what we're doing right now. We are wasting time by propping up this fantasy that we could just turn off the physical distribution tomorrow and everything would be perfect. And why are we wasting our time trying to get Diamond back up and running anyway? Screw it. Well, because if we don't do that, there will not be comics. Now, if you think the right approach is to blow everything up, stop comic distribution completely for 5 to 6 years before a platform can be built, if you think that's a good idea, by all means, you can push for that. But nobody in their right mind thinks that's a good idea. If you take a 5 to 6 year hiatus from comics, comics are going away. As much as you hate Marvel or hate DC or hate Image or whatever you happen to hate, having everything go away will impact you negatively unless you absolutely don't care about comics whatsoever. If that's you, why are you listening to this show? I'm just saying. Leave your comments below. Let me know what you think about this. But let's stop with the fantasy land of digital is the big hero and all we need to do is just shut down all the comic shops and everything will be perfect. Just stop with that nonsense. And if you're going to push this solution, then tell us how. Don't just talk about your experience in walking into a comic store and not getting what you want, and therefore all comic shops would die. You sound like the idiots on Twitter who push this stuff. I don't like this Marvel comic, so therefore all Marvel must die. You sound like a dope. And if you've got 1 million plus subscribers, you shouldn't sound like a dope. Although, I guess lots do. Anyway, what do I know? Hey, there you go. Like, subscribe, get me to 1 million subscribers, and I can do my hot takes and all the rest. I'd love to. Leave your comments below. Follow me on Twitter or Facebook at Comic Perch, and thanks for listening.